So I did a video about China's advancing wave of fintech dominance, and I meant to add more segments to that video, but it was already running kind of long at 16 minutes, so I cut it short. But I'd really like to put a finer point on that topic, so I'm going to present that information in this part 2 video. I might even make a part 3 video because there's so much out there about China, and it's just, nobody has any idea. I mean, it's big stuff too. It's really big stuff. So anyway, without further ado, since I tend to wax verbose here, let's jump right into it. In part 1, I mentioned that the Chinese mainland overtook the United States as the #1 investment destination in fintech. So those stats were according to Citigroup, by the way, and you could look into this. And another interesting factoid here in regards to that is that 50% of all fintech investment is going to China. They're not doing a little bit better, they're doing a lot a bit better. So 2 points on that I want to touch down upon in regards to Trump campaign rhetoric versus what China's doing. And Trump diehards hate it when I point this out because, nobody wants to hear that their hero has flaws or maybe hoodwinked them. But I have many subscribers of mine found their way here through my analysis of the election videos. One video in particular that I did was called 6 Reasons Why Trump Will Win the Presidency or something like that. It was such a long time ago, which, not to toot my own horn, by the way, toot my own trumpet, womp womp womp. But I did upload that video about 6 or 7 months before the election, so I was right. Anyway, I digress. So point 1, I'm going to break this into 2 points. I'm going to try and keep this under 15 minutes. So Trump blamed China and Mexico for taking all the jobs. And, in some fairness, NAFTA, which was horrible, and I think most of us can agree on that. Some people on the far right and the people on the far left that I follow, I think they converge on that NAFTA is terrible. You got the Bernie Sanders crowd and they hate NAFTA, and you got the Trumpers and they hate NAFTA. It's like only the corporatist politicians like NAFTA because the big business, because it benefits them. And so yeah, everyone can agree that it's horrible, and that it's also, whatever percentage of jobs that were actually lost to other countries, that NAFTA and like free trade agreements, that was the why. And that's still being the case. The biggest hit to the U.S. manufacturing, though, is not free trade, quote-unquote free, because it's not free trade, really. It's not China, and it's not Mexico, and it's not Bangladesh. It's automation. That's the biggest. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. And people, of course, are like, no, it's the damn Mexicans. It's like, no, it really isn't. It really isn't. And I know that people hate to hear this, but stats tell a different story. And, yes, stats can be skewed in certain ways depending on the topic, but in this case, what you're looking at is in terms of numbers and raw data. There's really no way to skew it, because we know how many jobs there are. We know how many jobs were replaced by automation versus how many were lost to immigration, and so this is a very easy number to calculate. But okay, China indeed has claimed production jobs. In particular, when they joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, we saw a loss of jobs. But nevertheless, there was no downturn in U.S. manufacturing output. And so this is important. So, what? Scratch your head, question mark. Wait a minute. We're losing jobs, and yet there was no downturn in U.S. manufacturing output. No. In fact, the amount of goods that we're churning out since 2000 has increased. So the next question becomes, how is it that the U.S. lost 5 million factory jobs since 2000, but yet we're producing more goods since that time? And if you'd like to know more about the details of this, I will link the report from Ball State University, which is funny, Ball State University, in the description, where you can read for yourself that, free trade, again, quote unquote, it only accounted for 13% of lost jobs, factory jobs, and the other 88% of those jobs, of the jobs that were eliminated by automating factories. So if robots are replacing factory workers, someone, I assume, is going to make a tidy sum producing and servicing industrial robots. And I wonder, man, where do I pull this up? I wonder which country is investing their resources into the new automation-driven industrial revolution. China! Wow, look at that, China. China is now the world leader in robotics. See, I'm a little bit older. I'm in my mid-30s. I recall the days where like everybody was afraid in the 90s that, oh, you know, in the future, Japan was everything, robots and everything technology was Japan, but now it's China. So the leader of the Asian, not only the leader in Asia of technology is China, but the world leader is China in robotics. And yeah, so in part one of the video, the part one video, which I'll rename after I upload this, I made about the Chinese leading the way in technology. I mentioned that so much was going under the radar, and as far as legacy media, you know, reporting on it anyway, as far as legacy media reporting on it, they're not reporting on it at all, like hardly at all. They report about just all kinds of other red herring sort of distraction, diversionary issues. It's no surprise that this story about Foxconn's rollout of 1 million robots got almost no press, and you know, it got plenty of press when Foxconn, because that was the company that put the suicide nets around their buildings. You know, it sure got plenty of press then, because death and tragedy make glamorous front page news and clickbait, fantastic clickbait titles, but they don't convey any kind of informational anything. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Their goal is to replace 1 million workers with robots. So they've slowly been rolling them out since 2012. They're not there yet. So it's 2017 now, obviously, and they haven't hit the 1 million robots yet. But you know, why isn't anyone talking about this? It's really amazing. They haven't hit their goal, but still, it's been steady progress, and they're not alone. I mean, they're not alone. Robotics spending over in China is equivalent to $25 billion. But, you know, and it's expected to double. It's expected to double. Like here, I mean, look at this. Look at this. All links in the description. I say this constantly. All links in the description. And please, by all means, research yourself. If you can, like, poke any holes through what I'm presenting here and say, like, well, maybe you're making a big deal out of this because have you ever... I mean, I look into the American stuff, too. I'm all over technology and technology news. It's, like, one of my things. And this is not going to hurt China at all. So actually, yeah, let me phrase it this way. So, when people hear, oh, the robots are coming to take our jobs, in America, that's scary. But in China, it's not so much. And there's a reason why it's not going to hurt China, and it's only going to make them more competitive. And one reason why it's going to help China, where it would somewhat hurt the U.S., is because China has a shrinking labor force. You know, for a long time, they had the one-child policy, because of their exploding population, you know, over 1 billion people, like approaching 2 billion people. By the time they decided, like, okay, we got to do something about this. So they did the one-child policy, and for a long time, you couldn't have more than one child. And that created actually a gender imbalance among the Chinese population. There's more men than women because everybody wants men or wanted boy babies, but that's a totally different story. But that also contributes to the beginning retraction. So the population is beginning to retract, and they're putting in automation all over the place because they can. So their population is contracting, and it pays to put automation in. You know, so that means that the robot spending is just going to keep growing. Unlike the U.S., where, you know, here in the United States, you've got more people than jobs, and the population is still expanding. It's not retracting, and that's both through birth rates and immigration. I mean, and one last thing to put a punctuation mark on automation. And, you know, please stop me if you've heard this term before. It's called Industry 4.0. Let's see how many people are aware of that. Some people who will stumble upon this video. Perhaps some of my subscribers will know what this is, Industry 4.0. I'm betting that the average person, though, you know, is just sitting there scratching their head right now because it sounds like one of these kind of, I don't know, weird sort of niche economics buzzword type of things. But, yeah, so it's basically just a dumbed-down, media-friendly way of describing cyber-physical systems, which that is a sort of Internet of Things approach to manufacturing. If you don't know what Internet of Things is, it's like interconnected devices. So, if you have a smart this and a smart that, you can use your smartphone to turn on your smart oven before you come home. Why? I don't know. To preheat to bake bread or something. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of silly smart gadgets out there. But essentially, you're talking about interconnectivity of smart gadgets, and it could be anything. So that's the Internet of Things approach to manufacturing, where robots would all be remotely connected with, via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or whatever. And they'd be remotely controlled by computers, and those computers are equipped with AI, and that AI is going to learn and control the robots with little or no input from actual human operators. That's sort of one of the selling points, that you take out the human element completely. Like right now we have this idea of automation, and people are like, oh no, there'll be one foreman on every floor and no workers. It'll just be managers or something like that. But no, actually, as far as Industry 4.0 is concerned, people will not be involved in manufacturing at all. And, so some people are calling it, before I go off on another tangent, let me stay on track here. So some people are calling it the next industrial revolution. They're using, obviously this sort of flamboyant phraseology, or the new industrial revolution, or smart factories, whatever, etc. But, it's all mostly pompous media reporters who want to sound cool and hopefully coin a new phrase. But, yeah, like as far as that's concerned, this is not actually a new concept at all. So, I've mentioned the Venus Project before, and people like Jacques Fresco and older videos of mine, and I truly believe that's the way forward, those types of approaches. People like Buckminster Fuller, instruction manuals for Spaceship Earth. These books are the best that money can't buy. Jacques Fresco, real good books. I recommend them highly. People like that have been talking about this type of thing since, in Buckminster Fuller's case, since World War II. Since World War II, he's been talking about this. But yeah, this a lot of this kind of went semi-mainstream in the 70s. It kind of got buried by big business that it would hurt them, and also unions. Don't get it conflicted. Unions are sort of a double-edged sword at times. Just look at the way prison guard unions, have been fighting to keep marijuana illegal because it would void their industry somewhat. If you don't have 2.5 million non-violent drug offenders in jail. But anyway, so like more recently, people like the Zeitgeist movement and other guys like Peter Diamandis, who's again like all interesting people. If you don't follow them on Twitter or whatever your respective social media, check them out. Peter Diamandis, Zeitgeist movement, Jacques Fresco. If you're not aware, Buckminster Fuller. So yeah, this is not really a new concept, Industry 4.0, but Germany has finally functionally laid the foundation for this within the market system, and now China wants in, and so that's kind of a big deal. Now, the next important point on rising Chinese technological or technical dominance in this video will be about clean energy. Trump had a lot to say about coal. He kept referring to clean coal, air quotes, clean coal, which is a fantasy. Well, is there such a thing as clean coal? Like, technically there is. There kind of is such a thing as clean coal. But it's one of these types of technologies where it takes a lot more energy to make the coal burn clean than the amount of profitable energy that you can transfer onto the grid. So it's not really feasible. But aside from that, excuse me, there's just no future in coal because there's just, it's a finite resource and it's dirty, and it produces CO2, and there's so many reasons. It's costly to get rid of the waste, and a lot of times people just like pollute everywhere, and there's only so long you can pollute before it starts creeping into the rich neighborhoods, and then it's it becomes a problem. Yeah, so China understands that because obviously they're dealing with the fallout from their industrialization period, and they're kind of moving right past sort of industrialization to the next phase of society. And that's obvious because they're abandoning fossil fuels as fast as, at least as is economically feasible for them to do so. And here, let me pull this up, and now China is investing 2.5 trillion yuan, or the equivalent of $361 billion into renewable energy thereby creating 13 million jobs in the process too, by the way, for those who are like, oh, our gerbs. I take a gerb. If you're the type who's concerned about jobs, 13 million jobs is nothing to shake a stick at, especially in the United States. 13 million jobs goes a lot farther than it does in a country like China where you have over 1 billion people. So meanwhile, speaking of which, what the hell is the U.S. doing? No one seems to have any plan except go on TV and deny climate change is even a thing that's happening. And, so of course there's marches, which, I don't know what holding up a sign in the street is going to do because it didn't stop the Vietnam War. But if people want to congregate and connect, whatever, I mean, they shouldn't stop protesting if that's what they want to do. But, there needs to be some kind of concrete sort of plan of attack, action, something. On that note, like if you want to know who's going to become the emerging superpower as far as that, just controlling tech, that's huge. It's a huge thing. And so who's going to monopolize all that green energy tech? The Chinese. The Chinese are going to monopolize all the green energy tech, and then they'll sell it to the world. Because they could very well end up in control of that market in the next 10 years when most of the world finally decides, or 15 years. It's not going to be that much longer because, we can't keep going on the way we've been going since the dawn of it's been almost 100 years since, the Industrial Revolution. And the world has finally, much of the world, you look at the Paris Accords, is finally deciding to stop destroying the planet, thank God, if we're going to have a future as a species. And, where will the U.S. be at that time? It's going to be a giant slum, probably. And as the Chinese are going to be lounging in giant garden cities with robots doing all the crappy jobs. And meanwhile, they're going to be focusing on biotech and all kinds of other stuff. And who knows what type of systems they'll set up as far as like social safety nets for the population or whatever. Like, I don't know on that front, what the future may hold. Well, actually, an interesting thing, and I'll get to that in a second, as far as rising wealth in China. So after Trump got elected, I think a lot of people started realizing that there are human beings. There are a lot of human beings that live in the space between New York City and Los Angeles. Except most of the Democratic Party, because they still, of course, and Rachel Maddow, they idiotically think that Russia's to blame for everything. And I have a feeling that's just another one of these red herring issues that doesn't really have anything to do with... It's meant to distract is what it's meant to do, but I'm not going to get into too much political stuff or conspiracy theories or what have you. But, so to stay on track... I lost my train of thought. All right, so people are struggling for jobs, right? In the U.S., especially in the Rust Belt, and I've mentioned this before in many videos, and the magnitude of rapidly accelerating technological change is mind-blowing. And so China seems like they're lifting off. They're lifting off at warp 9. You reveal my Star Trek dorkness. So warp 9. So yeah, China's moving at warp 9 from the U.S. technologically, and we don't even have a plan to catch up at all. We're still tying our shoes like we're running a foot race, as the Chinese are feeding nitrous oxide into their damn spaceships. And if you don't believe me, so to kind of bring this full circle on something else that I was... an earlier point about building wealth in China just a few moments ago. How do we gauge Chinese success, right, versus American success? What metrics can we use? I'll give you two. I'll give you two examples. And I could give so many examples here, but let's just do two because I'm already running over time again. Let's just do two. Okay, here's one. Look at this. Just read that headline. So back in October, it was reported that China produces a new billionaire every week. And it's actually a bit faster than that. It's every 5 days. Every 5 days. Every 5 days, there's a new billionaire in China. Every 5 days, there's a new billionaire. You have to excuse my excitement, but like anytime I'm thinking about this, I'm looking at this right now. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Meanwhile, here I live in, sort of in Rust Belt kind of area of Pennsylvania, and I'm looking around, and everything's dilapidated and crappy. And I mean, my city looks like basically like a suburb of Detroit or something. It's terrible here. And there's a new billionaire in China every 5 days. People in America are struggling. Like, what is our plan going to be? So yeah, they're set to outpace the U.S. In numbers of millionaires too, which is another milestone. Like, they're not there yet. But they're getting there because the rate that they're increasing the number of Chinese millionaires is flying past ours. Man, and here's a quote from this Business Insider article. Excuse me, Alex Jones. Excuse me, pardon me. Yeah, so almost half of these new wealthy people came from, and this is a quote. You can read through this. It's came from half of these new millionaires and billionaires came from technology, real estate, and e-commerce sectors. Go back and watch part 1 of my dominant Chinese tech video, and I go over that about e-commerce. So in technology, real estate, and e-commerce. So technology, I've talked about. E-commerce, I've talked about. Real estate, I mean, it doesn't exactly belong in the technology realm, but there's a reason why I kind of want to finish off this video a little bit with a bit of real estate sort of news. And this will be the second. This is the second example. I said I was going to give 2 examples. So there's how do we gauge rising wealth in China, and this by the number of emerging millionaires and billionaires. And now, this leads me to my second example, which is real estate. So China's property market has been absolutely incredible and completely underreported, or people just don't pay attention. I think because, I don't know, if you live in the Western world or whatever, you think about China and you're like, well, whatever they're doing, who cares? Or, I got better things to think about, like, I don't know, Bill Nye, outrage over Bill Nye's Netflix gender, whatever the hell. It's like, no, that's nothing. That's nothing. That's a red herring issue. Like, stay focused on what people's livelihoods will depend on. And it's not the weird, wacky sort of social stuff. It's this. So, to be fair, the Chinese real estate market's starting to cool. It's starting to level off. But Chinese culture is such that parents are obliged to leave a home for their children. So when Chinese buyers look for real estate, and a lot of people, there might be some Asian people who will stumble across this, who are maybe second generation, and maybe they know this firsthand. Or maybe there's people from, I don't know, somewhere in Asia who are bilingual and they're watching this. They happen to stumble upon this video and they can kind of attest to this. That Asian culture is it's kind of a this is a kind of a cultural thing that you'll see throughout Asia. Maybe not everywhere, but in a lot of places, but specifically in China. People will buy 2 homes, like one for themselves and one for their children. Depending on whether or not, a caveat being, depending on whether or not a family's finances will permit that, naturally. But as I've already said, the amount of new wealth being generated is pretty outrageous. Whereas if you look at an average young person in America, this new generation is going to have a hell of a time. And I'm technically still in the millennial generation because the cutoff is 1982, weirdly enough. So I'm like I come in right underneath the wire, as I'm technically a millennial. And yeah, no, I do not own my own home. And this new generation, many of them in America anyway, do not, and throughout the Western world actually, and you can look at this for yourself. I'll post the link in the description. This is an article by Time where they cite where the original stats come from, and so you can comb through that for yourself. But yeah, so just look at the data here, China versus America. So 70% of millennials in China own their own homes, where only 35% of millennials in the United States own their own home. Why? Because they have no jobs. There are no jobs for them. And they end up racking up insane college loan debt. And that's partly there's a lot of blame to go around. Part of that goes on the shoulders of the kids. Part of it goes on kind of predatory lending. But, so there's plenty of blame to go around. Like, obviously, I didn't go to college because, I couldn't afford to and I didn't want to go into debt. So I didn't do that. Yeah, so they end up, a lot of these millennials, they end up back in their parents' house. And they get addicted to opioids and, or they shitpost memes on Twitter and, you know, masturbate to hentai porn and whatever else that they do to pass the time and kind of just take their mind off of the fact that, you know, they're the first generation in American history, you know, to be worse off economically than the generation preceding it. And it's interesting to see because this is a complete flip-flop in national wealth between China and America. And people need to get on the ball because the U.S. government's response to financial crisis after financial crisis is to just let the bubble burst. And I don't know that many people are aware of this. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this because I'm already going way over time. But yeah, you know, the government's just going to let everything go to hell. And the reason why they let everything go to hell is because they're in the pocket of the crony bankers. And their crony banker friends are getting rich, hedging their bets on economic collapse. So, you know, every time you hear that, like, oh no, we're looking at another bubble, and if it bursts, what are we going to do? We got to look to the government for regulations. We have to, you know, penalize the banking industry. We have to do all this. They're not going to do any of that. Because when the system crashes, you know, a lot of these people like Goldman Sachs and Citibank and you know, all these types of people, excuse me, they hedge their bets against the collapse. So when the worst comes to worst, they make money on it. They make money on it. And a lot of people don't realize that this is the way the system works. It's really twisted, and a lot of people are not aware of it. And again, you know, for more information, by all means, please research this stuff, people.